What's going on, everybody? JR from JR's Cars, and in this video we're going to be doing the brake lines on this 94 Jeep Renegade. So stick around and I'll show you how to get it done. So obviously first thing I did here was I took the hood and I put it all the way back. I wish I did that when I did the valve cover gasket, and if you missed that video you can check it out above over here. Unfortunately it was a windy day that day and I didn't want the hood to go anywhere, even though I know I probably could have put a ratchet strap on there and left it where it was, but not a big deal. So what I've also been doing is over the last couple days I've been spraying the junctions at the end of the lines just to get them freed up, make sure that, you know, if they are a little bit rusty, that they're going to come out free. Did the same with the bleeders in the front and the rear. So I think we should be all right now, but a couple other things I want to do right here, because gigantic hands, is I want to make a little bit more room in here for myself. So I'm going to remove the coolant overflow tank here just to get a little bit more room in this general area, because if you look here, that's where we're going to have to pull the lines off the metering block and off of the master cylinder. And then I'm also going to remove the air box because there's some lines that go across over here and to the other side, and it'll just clear up a little bit more room. So I'm going to get this out of the way, and then I'm going to empty the master cylinder, whatever's left in here, because it's probably nothing in there anyway. Let's see, is there anything in this one? There's a little bit in that one. So I'm going to empty it out just so when we start breaking lines free, it's not leaking out. That'll help you out too, so you're not blowing oil all over the place. And I want to give a shout out to Inline Tube here, because they were the only place that I was able to find pre-made, pre-bent, pre-terminated lines for this Jeep Wrangler with the ABS pump. Now, mind you, this is not sponsored. I paid full price for this. I didn't get any discounts. This is just, something that I had found that I was really happy to find, because, like I said, every other place that I've looked didn't have the ABS lines with it too, which is all this over here. So if you're in the market to do the brake lines on your Jeep Wrangler and you have ABS, you should check them out. And this is going to be your part number right there. And if you look at the detail that's put into the lines too, they have nice clean bends. Obviously you're going to have your shipping loops that are put in there for the longer lines that go to the back. But, having the spiral around the outside of the pipe too, most manufacturers of these pipes don't even put these on there anymore. So that was, I was pleasantly surprised to see that that's what I got when I opened up the box. Okay, so now that the coolant overflow tank is gone, and the air box is gone, which, by the way, they make extremely easy to take out, because all it is just these little clips here. You can see that you got a ton of room to work in here. It gives you access to all the lines that you need access to, all the way down to the frame up here. And this is where the bulk of the work is going to be done. So really, this is just making your life easier. So you can see on this side here too, gives you plenty of room. I can get these wires out of the way. I'll do that off camera, not a big deal. It gives you plenty of room to get to everything on this side, and you can see how these lines are looking pretty bad at this point. So, and somebody already had gone through and replaced one of these, so that just shows that these lines, it's time to replace them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at the front, start at the master cylinder, these lines up here, right? There's this line, and then there's this line here, which go into your proportioning valve. So what I'm going to do is match up the ones that we have our replacements on. We'll see which one goes to which, and then we'll start taking those off. Start at the top, work our way down. And one thing that I'm noticing here is on the replacements, and you can see it on the other one too, I'll show you in a sec, but the ends, there's two different sized ends on them too. So you have to match them up, because if you look in here, you can see that this side over here has the larger end, and this side over here has the smaller ends. Now, being that these guys look as crispy as they are, I'm going to do it the way that I normally like to do it. And that is, I'll come in here, I'll cut the line, and then I'll be able to get a socket on the end of this instead of trying to get a wrench on it and rounding this off. You're better off cutting it and then putting a socket on it, because you're guaranteed to get this out without any issues of rounding those lines off. And I'll do that for any one of these that looks like this. But when you look at ones like these, that's not bad. You can get that with a wrench. You could try it with a wrench. If it doesn't move, then cut it and do the same thing here. And like this one here. This one almost looks perfect, so I should be able to get this with a wrench. But at least for these here, I'm going to cut these and get a socket on it and pull those straight out. See? Look at that. Came right out without arguing with me. No problems. Otherwise, you may have rounded that head off, and you would have been for a hell of a time trying to get that out. Now, when you're pulling out the filling out of the proportioning valve here, what I like to do is I like to get a nice big open adjustable wrench and put it on the block itself, so I can hold on to that and keep that steady as I'm trying to break that free, because otherwise you can see that that's pretty flexible. Realistically, it's always nice to have a little bit extra on there. Of course, you can use it as leverage too. There you go. That's out of there now. Now it's time to get the other one. And for those of you who have noticed, they're probably asking, why are you using just a regular wrench on that? You should be using one of the line wrenches. Well, my 12mm line wrench went MIA, so you make do with what you have. So let's get this bottom one out of here now. The top one's out and loose. And there we go. See, that one spun. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm not going to mess around with it anymore. I'm going to cut it, and then I'll just get that with a socket, because that's going to make it a ton easier. And that goes to show you that sometimes having these wrenches like this really isn't the best method. Okay, so one thing I found out here is they're not all going to be the same size ends. It's really weird. So this one up here was a 14. That one down there was a 14. That one down there was a 13. This one was an 11. And that one was a 12. So you're obviously going to have different sizes all around. Just work with what you have. Get the right size. Make sure you put everything back together properly, and you're not going to strip anything out. If you do it the method that I showed you with cutting the line off and then putting a socket on it, easiest way to do it. So now that those are out, now it's time for the new ones to go back in. Okay, so the proportioning valve is held in place by the lines, but in addition to the lines, there's a metal bracket that's attached to the brake booster. You want to take that off to get you a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to putting these lines back on, because it'll make your life a lot easier. All right, so one thing I found with this kit that I actually really like is that the ends that they put on here are color-coded, and they're color-coded by what size they are. So this one up here, you might not be able to see really the difference between this green and that green over there, but this one is a more like grass green. Those are 13 millimeters. The one in the bottom there, that one is more of like a mint green. That one's a 14 millimeter. The pink one, pinkish red one over there is an 11 millimeter. And then the one on the top over there, which is just brown, that one is a 12 millimeter. So they definitely make it easier for you going in, than it does coming out. So now that that's done, the master cylinder side, now we have to get the lines going from the proportioning valve over to the ABS sensor, the ABS block over here, taken care of. And these are the lines that are provided with the kit. And knowing what I now know about the color coding, it'll make it a little bit easier to get those off and get this taken care of. So I'm going to cut those off. I'll put these back on, and then I'll come back. Now, Inline Tube gives you a diagram of all the lines that come in the box and what their basic shape is and where they're located. You can see that these are the two that we're working on right now, the proportioning to ABS block, and the same thing for the other one. But what you really want to do, aside from obviously checking the box to make sure that you have everything you need, is to just give it a fit. Before you go and remove anything, you want to make sure that the lines that are provided to you are the correct ones. So this line here is the one we're going to be replacing. It doesn't have the flex hose in it, which most replacements don't at this point. They just replace it with the standard line. But if you swing it in there before you take everything apart, you can actually make sure that the line is going to fit where it needs to go before you take the old part off, because once you take the old part off and if you cut them, you're pretty well screwed. So that's going to go in there like that. And then you can see down there, it'll go into the proportioning valve there. Well, yeah, there. So this line looks good. The other line I've already checked out. That looks good too. But you also have to remember too that even though these are, pre-bent tubes and everything else, you're going to have to adjust them a little bit. You'll have to tweak them a little, bend them here and there, things like that, to make sure that they fit. You really don't want to cross thread one of these things, because then you're really screwed. But you're going to have to adjust them a little bit. They're not going to be drop in perfect. It's just the way that it is. They get you very, very close. And honestly, I didn't have to do much tweaking with those two at all. But, when it comes to any of these other pipes, just know that you should be expecting that to happen. And you know what? Honestly, for me not having to bend them, put the ends on them, flare them, and do all that, I'll pay a little bit extra money to bend them just a little bit and have these things pre-made any day of the week. And then, of course, just like the other ones, the easiest way that I've found to do it is to cut the lines and then put the ratchet on the end and spin them right out that way. Now, the one thing you have to watch for here is on the proportioning valve, you have these two line nuts here. So it actually made it a little bit easier, because I was able to get a wrench on this, put the ratchet on the other one, and then just basically squeeze them together, and it broke free without a problem. So now I'm going to put these lines in, and we'll get on to the rest. Okay, those lines are all back in, hooked up to the ABS pump. I have the proportioning valve reconnected back up to the brake booster over here, and everything is tightened down. So now what we have to do is we have to disconnect these lines. Two of them go up to the front, one of them goes to the back, and then there's going to be the splitter up over the axle that's going to go to the driver's side and then to the passenger side. Those are two separate lines to replace. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the one that goes to the rear, and I believe, let's see, we can look down here. That right there is the line that goes to the rear. So if we trace that up here, that is going to be this very first one up in the front here. So I'm going to disconnect this one, because this one's actually the line that blew all the way in the back. That one, it actually blew just behind the door. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disconnect that line. I'm going to start cutting out little bits, and then we'll trace it down. We'll go to the back, we'll replace that line, and then we'll do the two over axle lines that go to the wheel cylinders in the back. We'll get the rear squared away, and then we'll start working on the front, because honestly, the passenger side front is the one that scares me the most. Now mind you, it doesn't scare me because it comes all the way across. It goes up the front over here and then comes around. But this is the line. You could see it down there, and where it meets up into the flex hose up here. That's probably going to give me a hard time there. So that's definitely one I'm going to end up cutting and putting the ratchet on, because that one really, really looks bad. Let me zoom you in here so you can see how rusty it is there. I'm worried about that one not coming out, but I've had it soaking for a while, so hopefully that did the trick. All right, so I'm going to break the one that goes to the rear free. And because of where it's located, I really can't get my saw in there to cut it close enough. So I'm just going to try to break it off with the wrench here, and let's see if that gets the job done. Doesn't look bad, doesn't look rusty, so it should be all right. Cool. There's that one. All right, so that broke free pretty easily, but then again, the top up by the ABS block really isn't my concern. It's more getting down towards the back end of the car where it's actually split, and where it busted actually was where the clip is that it anchors to the frame itself. So what I need to do at this point is start chopping out the bits. I'm not going to take the whole thing out in one block like that, so I'm just going to cut the line, take some out, cut some more, take it out, and then work my way all the way to the back. And when I get to the back, we'll come back and I'll show you what that looks like on the back side, what you have to remove too. All right, so I got about as far as I'm going to go now. I pulled the line from here through. There's the transmission and transfer case cover that's on the bottom. The line goes through that across the frame rail. I'll show you that in a second here, but to get to the stuff in the back, you're going to want to take the driver's side tire off, get it up in the air, get a jack stand underneath it, because the majority of the stuff that you're going to be looking for is going to be in this general area, and it's going to make it a ton easier not having that wheel in the way. All right, so you can see here, hopefully, let's see if I can get some light on this. This is your frame rail right here. It rides along the the inside of the frame rail. This is your cross member, your skid plate for the transmission and the transfer case. It goes along here, and then it comes back along the inside of the frame rail again, and then it comes out in this bundle over here, and then it goes up and over. I'll show you that in a second here. But as you can see, I already got the new line coming down here. So the beginning part of it is in place, but the whole thing is I need to get the rear section off here. And with the tire out of the way, you could really see this line here is the brake line when it comes up over the frame rail, which then is this line here. And then if we go to the back side of the axle here, right there is where the line comes in, and it goes to the rubber line, which goes to the axle, and then it splits off. This side that you're looking at right here goes to the driver's side rear wheel, and then on the other side of that junction goes to the passenger side, which looks like it was already replaced at one point. So I'm going to do the same thing that I did up front. I'm going to cut that line. I'm going to get it off with a socket. Hopefully, this one looks really rusty too. Get that off of there, get the rest of this line out, put the new line in, and then I'll show you what it is, because this is going to be a pain. I'm not going to do this on camera. All right, so we're on day 2. I had to quit on this last night because it was just getting too cold, too raw. It was just nasty out. And of course, now today we're dealing with 40-mile-an-hour winds. So bear any wind noise that you get here. I'm going to try and hide you as much as I can, so it might even be a little muffled. So what I have is I got the new line in. I was able to get the line out of the hose here. I got the new line in. It's connected to the hose. I got this back in. This is all squared away. Then what I also did was I was able to get the new driver side line in here. Again, just cut it, this one was a 3/8. So I cut it, put a 3/8 on here, ran the line out, and you should be able to see it hopefully here. Now this is on the back of the wheel cylinder here. Again, that was a 3/8 fitting. So you're gonna find just different size fittings all over this car. These are the standard inverted flare. Same thing with this one here, and the same thing with the hose. The ones up front going to the proportioning valve and the master cylinder are bubble flares. It's just all over the place. There's so many different fittings. So, like I said earlier, you just make do with what you have and go from there. So now I got this all in. I got this all, the line all in. So now what I need to do is I need to join the front and rear sections of this hose, because you can see the new hose right here. I have to get that up against the frame rail, and it comes in two different pieces, and of course the fitting stops right here, right underneath the skid plate. So I have the coupler already in there, and what I'll have to do is I'll have to get the front section put in so that way I can get, or at least put the front section connected to this, so that way I could do the front of it and have it all fully connected up front. And then I'll button this up against the frame rail, and then that will conclude at least this side. Going to the rear, and then I have to do that passenger rear crossover to the wheel cylinder on that side. So we'll get that one done next. But I'll show you what this looks like when I have this completed. All right, so we got this all buttoned up here. This one is set. It's going down the frame rail. Now this one, I'm going to have to adjust a little bit. It looks like once that coolant tank is back in place, make the adjustment to the line. That's not a big deal. But if you look down below, you can see that's the new line right there that comes out, goes down the frame rail, and goes back to the rear of the car. Well, rear of the truck, I shouldn't say car. But what I like to do, let's see if I can zoom in here too. So when I'm putting the lines in, I don't like them touching anything on the frame or on the body. So usually I'll set them off just a little bit of the metal. So touching the frame, touching the body, or the contact points where they anchor to the body or the frame, those are your typical points where you're going to get corrosion, and you'll probably get rust, and the lines will blow out then. So I like to do this to try to avoid it. Okay, so here is from the bottom side looking up. That's the engine bay up there. It's the line that comes down the frame rail. Kind of tight down here, but you can see that's where the coupler is, and this is where the skid plate is. So it was right up here. I had the coupler on the one side before I put it in. Just attached this side, and then from here you can see it goes all the way to the back. It's all clipped in place, goes back up over the frame and to that flex hose. So now at this point, what I have to do is get up underneath it in the back there. I got to put the tire back on the driver's side. I'm going to jack up the passenger side to make it easier on me, get that crossover tube done, and then we call the rear end of the truck completed. Then we work on the front. All right, so passenger side is complete. I got the line in here. We're all good. We're tightened down. I got that going across underneath this bracket right here. You want to make sure that you put this back in, because this is what's going to hold your line above the axle. You don't want this to fall below the axle. You don't want it to twist around. So make sure you put it back underneath the keeper. I just got to tighten that down. And then it goes over the axle, and it goes over to the other side. It's connected in, so we're good here. But I wanted to give you another heads up as to something else that I'm doing in here too, is that when I'm doing these, when I take the line out, what I'm doing is I'm taking some brake clean and I'm flushing out the inside of the receiving end, because that way I can make sure there's no debris in there. So when I plug this line in and I tighten it down, I know I'm not going to have any debris in there causing any kind of leaks. And the other thing I'm doing is making sure that that bleeder valve opens up too, which both of these on the back side open up no problem. So we're not going to have any problems bleeding out. The problem is if you can't get these to open, you're going to end up having to change the wheel cylinder in the backs, because you're not going to be able to bleed these brakes out. So this is a good sign. I've also checked the drum pads in the back here, and they look really good. So there's nothing more to do on the back end here. So now it's time to go up front. Okay, so I'm not about to do the hardest line, or the one that I have the most concern about, last. So I'm going to do this one next, the passenger front, the one that I said was pretty rusted out. Although it doesn't look too bad at this point. Like this is totally doable at this point. Like I should be able to cut that just like I did with the other ones, get a socket on the end of it, and give that a good tug to get that out of there. It was really no different than the back hose, that flex hose that was going over the axle. So I think I should be able to do this without a problem. So I'm going to get at this one. I'll cut it, and then I'll see if I can break this thing free, and I'll see if I could set up the tripod so you could see how I'm doing this as well, and you know, we could see about getting this thing done together. There it is. Well, crap. As you can see, it's not coming out because it's actually the fitting that that it broke off at the fitting end. So I'll have to get a hose for this, but not a big deal. What I'll do is just to keep things moving, I'm going to do the driver's side. That's an easier thing to do right now. I'll get the hose, and then we'll get this side done, but that's going to be a little bit later. But let's do the driver's side first now. Change of plans. So we'll do the driver's side front now, and this one's already been replaced. So you can see that it should be nice and easy to do. It comes down and goes right in. Where are we? Down there on the frame. So being that that one's been off before, that one should be nice and easy. We'll get this line put in. I'll go over. I'll go get the flex hose for the passenger side, and then we'll get the rest of this buttoned up and get this thing bled out. Okay, so you can see that I've already cut this off on the passenger side here. This is that rusty line that's going to go down the passenger side, and I'll get you underneath to take a look at what it looks like underneath the front. But it comes all the way across over here to the driver's side, this here, and then I have it bent up here, but it goes across, down underneath where the airbox was, and then it comes up to the ABS block up here. So I already have it cut off here on the ABS block. I just have to take the nut out, which is nice and simple to do. But let me show you down below here. All right, so it might be a little difficult to see, but you can see the line right up there. It's going to run across the frame rail. It's going to come up behind the power steering box. And it's going to run across up on the core support here. And then that's the line that's going to go up along the frame rail there. So I'm going to get all of this junk out, and we're going to make way for the new stuff. And as far as the new stuff goes, just like with the line that goes to the rear, it's split in two sections. So you're going to need the coupler to couple the two together. So it's not really a big deal as long as you do it right and you get those fittings nice and tight. Should be leak free. I don't know why they do these things. They cut the lines and they put the union to spline the two of them together right in a spot where you can't get anywhere. And if you're underneath the car, it's right on top of the steering box. It's really bad. So basically, just you could release the cover here. Now, of course, being that this is a Renegade, it has, the big beauty fenders and things like that. If you have a regular Wrangler, this may be a little bit more open for you to get to. But there's a couple little body pins that you could pull out. Once you do that, you get access to where your lines are going to come through. You can put them together there and then put everything back together and then snap it into place and then button up the ABS block, button up the line going into the flex tube. And then from there, then you're able to bleed out the system. So I have a little bit more work to do here. Let me get to this. I'll put everything back together. And then hopefully, fingers crossed, at that point, I'll be ready to bleed these brakes out. Captain's log, day infinity. Well, we got all the lines put back together. They're all routed in there. I got the coolant reservoir set up. I got the crossover line that goes over to the front passenger side complete. So now it's time to bleed the brakes out. And generally, what I like to do, especially with cars with ABS, is being that this only has 3 lines. Some will have a line that goes to each one of the 4 wheels. This one has the one for the front left, front right, and then the one that goes straight to the rear axle, and then that splits from there. So there's only 3 that we have to deal with. What I do is I like to open up the bleeders on all 4 corners. I'll fill up the reservoir, and then what I'll do is I'll let gravity kind of take its place and start filling up the ABS pump a little bit before I actually start doing the pump procedure of bleeding out the brakes. That way what it'll do is it'll start filling up that ABS block and it'll start pushing out some of the air that's there, but it's not just going to trap it in one line. If you open up, say, you always want to start from your farthest line first, so that's going to be your passenger rear from this because the master's up here, and that's generally all cars as it is. It could trap air pockets inside the ABS unit if you just open the one. So that's why I like to have all of them open, so that way as gravity's taking place and the fluid is bleeding down, it's going into the ABS block and then it's coming out all 3 lines at the same time. Makes for a little bit quicker bleeding procedure when you're actually pushing on the pedal to clear the lines out. So I have all the lines opened up. At this point, I'm going to put fluid in it. I'll let gravity take its place for a little bit, and then I'll close the lines and I'll start with the procedure, which is going to be longest line first, the passenger rear, driver rear, passenger front, driver front. And then we'll put the rest of the airbox and everything back together, so it's cleaned up and everything's back together. We'll give it a start and we'll test the brakes out and see how we did here. And of course, while you're doing this, you want to make sure that you're keeping the master cylinder reservoir full, because you don't want to run this dry and then risk blowing air through the line and then having to do this whole thing all over again. So make sure that you're watching this and that you don't run this dry. Now the back ones are all complete and it's time to get to the passenger side front. So like I said before, I'm going to show you how I'm doing this as a one-man job. I have my hose that's connected to the bleeder valve here on the caliper, and I have it coming up and uphill as a sweeping curve here right into the Corona bottle, because this job I've consumed a few of these to try to forget it. But if you look at the bottom of the bottle there, the hose goes all the way down into the bottom, and it's touching the bottom of the bottle there. So that way, when any of the fluid is going in, we're not going to get air bleeding back up. And it's the same thing of why we have this loop in here too, is that this line will stay full with fluid, and it's not going to allow any air to go back in. So I'm going to go inside, I'll pump the brakes. I already have the bleeder screw open, so I'm going to show you how this works. All right, so as you can see, there's still plenty of fluid in here. I'm going to pump this out just a little bit more because that fluid really isn't looking all the best. It's probably gunk that's still in the system. So I'm going to pump this out a couple more times, and then I'll just close this bleeder valve. But you could see in the line itself is all clear brake fluid. There's no air in it, which is going to be good to go. I'll close this up. I'll do the driver's side, and then we're going to test this baby out. Alrighty, well, that's all she wrote for this job. Just got to make sure that that you fill it back up to the line in here. Make sure that that's all good to go. Now it's time for a test drive. So there you have it. Brakes are done, they're bled out. Brakes feel really nice in the truck. Everything's good to go. There's no leaks that I can see, so that's always a bonus. And I think we're pretty good to call this one done. So if you're looking at doing this, probably I would allot for about a good 3 days to do. Only because you're gonna end up getting frustrated doing things. You're working under the truck, you're working on your back, things like that. Sometimes you need to step away from it, go have a cold one, and come back. I've had to do that a couple times. So whatever it is, it gets the job done, right? So do me a favor, if this helped you out, smash that like button, drop your comments down below, and subscribe to the channel because I have more coming for you. I hope everybody's staying safe, happy motoring, and I'll catch you in the next video.